Well, hello, my name's Wayne Wolt. I'm with the Department of Biological Systems Engineering at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and I'm also affiliated with Nebraska Extension. What I'd like to do is visit with you a little bit today about unmanned aircraft systems. There's a great deal of interest in unmanned aircraft, and yet there are some considerations to keep in mind. There's a lot of rules and regulations associated with unmanned aircraft. We'll just touch on some of them here today. First off, we probably ought to visit about the Federal Aviation Administration and how the Federal Aviation Administration is considering what's called small unmanned aircraft system as being those that are less than 55 pounds. In terms of unmanned aircraft systems, there's two main categories. One would be a fixed wing, something like what I have here in front of me. This is a airplane. These aircraft like this tend to have longer flight durations. This will fly for about an hour and a half on a battery, something like this. It's electric powered aircraft and tend to be used for covering larger areas over fields and crops to identify potential areas of concern. On a launch on something like this, we use a winch launch, where the electric powered winch is used to bring this aircraft up into the air, kind of launch it. Then we'll fly at about 100-meter elevation or altitude above ground level, or that's about 330 feet or so to fly a field. And then for landing, we'll come in and just bring it in with flaps activated to go ahead and land into an open area. Again, these are used for surveillance, for larger land areas, to get bigger picture of what's going on. It flies about 40 miles per hour, and to cover an 80-acre field takes us about 35 minutes, including launch and landing and everything. On the other hand, the multi-rotor copters, something like this one back here, tend to have a shorter flight duration, about maybe 15 minutes on average, some 10 minutes, some 20 minutes, depends on how much they're carrying. But they'll fly at about 15 to 20 miles per hour. They're very helpful for what we call diagnostics, or really zooming in on a field area. They do have vertical takeoff and landing. That's a real nice feature for them. What's interesting about unmanned aircraft is the advances in technology. Computers are really coming on strong. Global positioning systems are allowing these to find all kinds of uses and applications. It's a real interesting time to be involved with them, and we'll talk a little bit more about them here as we move forward through this program. One of the real great potential areas for unmanned aircraft is going to be in agriculture. Estimates are that agriculture will be about 70 to 80% of the market for unmanned aircraft systems in the United States. There's a tremendous potential for unmanned aircraft to help in management of large land areas when you've got to cover a large area of land. Some of the applications would include monitoring for moisture stress, monitoring for nutrient deficiencies, looking at crop growth and development, and of course watching for pests and invasiveness of pests, and being aware of that and then taking steps to manage pests. One thing that's going to be happening with these unmanned aircraft systems, they're going to be providing a lot of data. Sometimes that's called big data, and also that big data will be transformed into better decisions and knowledge and ability to manage these large land areas in a more efficient manner, more sustainable manner. So we're really excited about unmanned aircraft and what potential it'll hold for agriculture and especially pest management. Okay, so in terms of moving forward with unmanned aircraft systems, there are some challenges that lie before us. One of them is our complex national airspace here over the United States. It's one of the most complex airspaces in the world, and the FAA is tasked with keeping the airspace safe. And they take the task very seriously. And so they're watching the evolution of unmanned aircraft systems with a great deal of interest. They're also working on regulations to integrate unmanned aircraft into the national airspace. From a hobby point of view, unmanned aircraft, flying unmanned aircraft systems is fine. For pleasure, for fun, it's as long as you're operating under the guidelines of the AMA, which is a group of hobbyists, National Association for Hobbyists. That's fine. The guidelines are quite simple. Things like staying away from urban areas, populated areas, staying below 400 foot above ground level, keeping the unmanned aircraft system always within your line of sight. Never letting it get out of your line of sight will be important. So some fairly practical kinds of things just to be safe with them. That's no problem. FAA is fine with that for hobby purposes. Unmanned aircraft are currently illegal to fly for commercial purposes in the national airspace. The FAA regulates the national airspace, takes their job very seriously, as they should, because their primary concern is safety. For commercial purposes, again, it's illegal to fly unmanned aircraft systems, and the FAA view on commercial is quite restrictive. They view any sort of exchange of services or goods for money, or goods and services for goods of services, as a commercial type of endeavor. And that would be illegal with unmanned aircraft systems. The FAA's position on this is that if a crop is being grown for hobby purposes, then it would be okay to fly an unmanned aircraft over that crop. If the crop is being grown for commercial purposes, then any unmanned aircraft flying over that crop would be commercial flying. So it's quite a restrictive interpretation. There is a great deal of concern about safety for these, and when you bring commercial operations in, everything is ramped up and everything becomes much more serious and a greater concern. The good news is, though, is that the FAA is working on integrating unmanned aircraft system into the national airspace. They're working on the rules and regulations. These are set to be published here in the very near future in a draft form, and we'll all have a chance to get a look at where the FAA is going with these rules and how they're going to interpret commercial flight of unmanned aircraft systems moving forward. But the main take-home message right now is that commercial use of unmanned aircraft, whether it's fixed wing or even the multi-rotor, would be illegal in the United States. Well, in terms of unmanned aircraft systems and flight in the national airspace, there are some real reasons that the FAA is concerned. And these are dealing mainly with other low-flying aircraft. There's actually quite a few aircraft out there that fly, especially across less populated areas. These would be, for example, aircraft that are surveilling and looking over power line systems, looking at pipelines, flying pipeline routes to make sure that they're safe, medevac types of flights, and also, for example, aerial applicators are going to be flying low, probably using the same kind of airspace that we would expect to use for unmanned aircraft. And last thing we want is any sort of a collision or any sort of a mishap that might occur if these were to collide and find their way into the same airspace. So we really need to be concerned about that. The stakes are very high. Well, as we've seen, there's a number of different types of unmanned aircraft. There's the fixed wing, there's the multi-rotor, something like this one. Each unmanned aircraft brings its own features and limitations to the table, to its use. But between them all, we can find some real interesting applications in agriculture, some real potential out there for use in agriculture. It's an exciting time. So we know that unmanned aircraft systems will be integrated in the national airspace. We're going to find great applications for them in agriculture. It's an exciting time. I would, though, point you to a very good website on unmanned aircraft systems and their rules and regulations, their current status. And that is www.knowbeforeyouFly.org. Excellent website. It'll help you understand more about the legal, the rules, the regulations for flight of unmanned aircraft systems from both a hobby and a commercial point of view. We just need to give a little bit of time for the Federal Aviation Administration to develop the rules and the regulations that allow for their safe use in agricultural purposes.